The desert sun was merciless, beating down on the rocky soil like a hammer against steel. At the edge of a remote New Mexico military training facility, one that didn't exist on any official map, a line of Navy SEAL snipers stood in silence, waiting for their next live-fire test. Beside them stood a woman. She didn't wear a uniform. She didn't wear a name tag. She didn't even wear military-grade boots. Just a worn gray ball cap, faded jeans, and a black long-sleeve shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. Her rifle case was custom, matte black with no logos. Her eyes were hidden behind dark lenses, and she hadn't spoken more than 3 words since arriving that morning. They called her Whisper. Not officially, of course. Officially, she didn't exist. There was no personnel file, no ID badge, no clearance level, even though she somehow walked straight through the security gate with 2 escorting officers in civilian suits and a cryptic letter that the commanding officer refused to discuss. Rumors spread fast in elite circles, especially among alpha warriors like SEALs. Some said she was CIA. Others whispered she was part of a shadow unit the military didn't talk about. But most didn't care who she was. They just wanted to know if she could shoot. The answer came quickly. On day 1, the instructor set up a long-distance range to 1,200 yards across uneven, wind-blasted terrain. The SEAL candidates took turns. Most hit their targets after several adjustments. Some didn't hit them at all. Then it was her turn. She lay down without a word, opened her case, assembled her rifle, a sleek, black precision sniper system, with hand-scratched marks on the barrel. Notches, too many to count. She slid into position like she had done it 1,000 times in 1,000 lifetimes. Target Bravo 7. Winds shifting north by northeast, 5 to 6 knots, the instructor called out, watching from behind. She didn't respond. Instead, she adjusted for wind and distance with movements so subtle they were almost instinctive. Her breathing slowed. The range went still. Even the other SEALs found themselves holding their breath. Then, crack, the round sliced through the air and struck the steel plate dead center. Not an inch off, not a smudge of error. Just perfection. Again, said the instructor, almost. Testing her. She chambered the next round and fired. Another perfect shot. No delay, no second-guessing. Just mechanical, emotionless precision. By the 5th shot, she was hitting every target in sequence, varying distances, odd angles, even one partially obscured by brush. She completed the entire firing order in half the time of the fastest SEAL. No one spoke for a moment. Who the hell is she? One of the candidates whispered. I heard she used to train CIA operatives. Another muttered. No, man. I heard she was part of a classified Israeli sniper program and defected. None of it was true, but none of it mattered. The only thing that did was what they'd seen with their own eyes. A civilian outshooting some of the best snipers in the world and doing it with eerie calm, like the whole thing was beneath her attention. That evening in the mess hall, she sat alone at the corner table, not eating, just cleaning her weapon with slow, deliberate movements. One of the SEALs, a tall, wiry guy named Garza, approached her. You ex-military? He asked, more out of curiosity than malice. She didn't answer, just wondering how you got into a place like this, without stripes or a patch. Still nothing. Garza let out a short laugh and said, You know, respect's earned here. Doesn't matter what strings you pulled to get through the gate. She finally looked up. Her voice was low and even. Then earn it. Garza blinked. Excuse me? I didn't pull strings. I was requested. I didn't come here to play soldier. I came to shoot. And with that, she turned back to her rifle. The next day, Garza watched her shoot again. This time, standing in kneeling positions under pressure drills. She didn't just hit targets, she predicted movements, adjusted on the fly, and shot between wind gusts like she had the weather coded into her blood. Later that week, she participated in a timed hostage rescue course, a test involving simulated terrorists holding dummies meant to represent civilians. A test designed to force quick decisions under stress. She cleared the course in record time with 0 civilian casualties and all targets neutralized. No one else had done that in 2 years. By Friday, no one questioned her place anymore. The instructors stopped calling her the civilian. They started calling her ma'am. Even the more skeptical SEALs began to nod at her in passing. One senior petty officer left an energy bar on her cleaning table, a silent offering of respect. But the most telling moment came during a private assessment with the range master, a retired Marine sniper known for chewing up egos. "She's not just accurate," he later said in a debrief. "She's surgical. She sees the wind before it moves, anticipates bullet drop like she wrote the physics, and her breathing, her rhythm, it's unnatural, not mechanical, like instinct. Like the rifle is part of her." A pause. She doesn't shoot to prove anything. She shoots because it's the only time she's herself. By the end of the week, the name Whisper had become more than a nickname. It was a warning. A legend in the making, and no one, not even the SEALs, would ever look at her the same way again. Before anyone called her Whisper, she was just Logan. No last name, no middle initial at least, not one she gave freely. She preferred solitude and silence, 2 things that came easily in the dense forests of western Montana, where she had grown up living off the land. She was raised on a forgotten patch of acreage just outside of Kalispell. Her father, a Vietnam vet turned wilderness guide, never believed in schools or systems. "The wild teaches you what you need," he'd say, handing her a .22 rifle on her 7th birthday. "Read the wind, trust your gut, and never waste a shot." Logan took that to heart. By age 12, she could track elk through frozen forests and land clean kills from 600 yards out. She didn't hunt for sport. She hunted for food, for survival. Her mother, quiet and strong, homeschooled her between trapping seasons, teaching her everything from anatomy to algebra, using torn-up textbooks, and nature as her chalkboard. They were poor, but they were proud. They didn't ask for help, and they never relied on anyone. Then came the crash. One icy January night, her parents took a back road to town for supplies. A semi, jackknifed on black ice, took them both in an instant. Logan was 16. No relatives. No family friends close enough to call. She didn't cry. She didn't speak for days. She just packed a rucksack, took her father's rifle, and vanished into the woods. For a while, she simply disappeared. Some say she lived in the wild for nearly 2 years, hunting, trapping, surviving off the grid. Others claimed they'd seen her pumping gas at a truck stop or walking the shoulder of I-90 in the rain with a rifle case and a pack. Then she resurfaced in the most unlikely of places, a long-range underground shooting competition held illegally on tribal land in Arizona that no one knew her name. She entered under L Ghost, paid the cash fee with crumpled bills, said almost nothing to anyone. But when her turn came, she stepped to the line with a battered old Remington 700, a civilian rifle, no mods, no bells or whistles, and annihilated every previous score. Not just beat them, humiliated them. She hit 1,000-yard targets while standing, made wind calls with no spotter, and cleaned house in time challenges designed to break a shooter's rhythm. One judge swore she hit a quarter-sized target at 800 yards. Blindfolded. When the last round fired and her total was announced, the crowd stared in stunned silence. She didn't wait for applause. She didn't take the prize money. She just nodded to the range marshal, packed up her gear, and walked off into the heat haze of the desert. That would have been the end of her story. Just another ghost shooter passing through Dot. Except someone had been watching. A man in a gray suit with a government ID that opened every door and a phone that never rang in public. He wasn't military. Not exactly. But he carried himself with the posture of someone who'd been around black sites and briefed presidents. He didn't approach her that day, though. He waited. He followed her for nearly a month. Through Colorado, into Idaho, and finally into a nowhere town in northern Nevada, where she was working nights at a roadside diner and sleeping in her truck. The kind of job that paid cash under the table. No questions asked. She was cleaning tables at 2 a.m. when he sat down in her section. He wore sunglasses indoors and ordered black coffee he never touched. "You're hard to find," he said. Without looking up, she didn't respond. "But you're even harder to replace." She set the tray down and studied him. "You a recruiter?" "No," he replied. "Recruiters deal in resumes. I deal in outcomes." He pulled out a plain manila envelope and slid it across the table. Inside, photos of insurgent leaders, field coordinates, satellite images. Details only someone deeply embedded in military intelligence would have. Logan said nothing, just stared at the images, her face unreadable. "I'm not here to threaten or pressure you," a man said. "I'm here to offer you a choice. There's a unit doesn't officially exist, working on advanced sniper support for deep field special operations. We're building the future of precision warfare. I'm not military," she said flatly. "That's why we want you," he replied. She picked up the folder again. "You want me to kill people." "I want you to save lives," he corrected. "Sometimes that requires the right trigger at the right time." She stared at him for a long moment. "And if I say no?" He smiled. "Then you go back to cleaning tables. And I walk out that door." No questions asked. She didn't answer him. Not then. But 3 days later, she showed up at a private airstrip. Outside Reno, carrying nothing but her rifle, her pack, and a silence that made even the pilots nervous. He was waiting on the tarmac. "No questions?" he asked. "Just one," she said. "What's that?" "Where's the range?" he smiled. "It's already watching you." As the plane lifted off, Logan didn't look back. She didn't need to. She wasn't running from anything anymore. She was walking straight into who she was always meant to be. Not a soldier, not a spy. Something else entirely. Something the world would never understand, but never forget. They called her Whisper, but long before that name echoed through Sniper circles and mission reports, she was simply the shadow that no one saw coming. And now, she was aimed at the heart of war itself. They said no outsider could survive in Camp Sentinel. Tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, Sentinel wasn't listed on any official record. Even within the military, few knew it existed. It was where America's most elite sniper, UNITS SEALs, Delta Force, Recon Marines, sent their best shooters for final phase training. This wasn't where you learned to shoot. This was where you proved you could shoot better than anyone alive. Logan, code name now officially. Whisper arrived without ceremony. No handshake. No briefing. Just a black chopper, a silent ride, and a file handed to the camp director, Colonel Alec Mason, marked Clearance Alpha -6. Observe only. She stepped off the chopper wearing a plain field jacket, tactical pants, and a patched-up rucksack. No name, no rank. Just her. The operators waiting for the new class watched her with suspicion. She was the only woman. The only one not in uniform. And the only one who walked as if she'd seen more combat than any of them, but couldn't care less about proving it. Sergeant First Class Tom Hawk Hawthorne, a 2-time Bronze Star recipient, muttered to another sniper, "Great, some Civvy consultant here to teach us how to hold a rifle." The others laughed. Not cruelly, but with the dry humor of men who'd seen enough death to joke about everything else. Mason briefed the group before the first field test. "You're not here to compete," he told them. "You're here to earn your place. Everyone's equal until their shot proves otherwise." He glanced at Whisper, not dismissively, but with careful restraint. "The exception," he added, "is her. She's here on evaluation. Don't ask questions you won't get answers to." That only made them more curious. The first trial was simple. Engage multiple targets in varied terrain, under pressure. The course spanned nearly a mile, using both simulated and live ammo, with time penalties for missed shots or hesitation. Each sniper took their turn. Some excelled, others faltered under shifting winds and sudden civilians in their line of fire. When it was Whisper's turn, a quiet tension settled over the group. She moved like fog, low, quiet, impossible to track. She didn't just fire. She flowed. She used elevation like a painter uses shadows, positioning herself to cover multiple angles at once. One observer noted she adjusted for wind before the trees even moved. She finished the course with 0 misses. 0. Perfect. Run. And she did it 2 minutes faster than the previous record. The silence afterward wasn't disrespect, it was disbelief. She ghosted those targets, Hawk muttered. She read them. Someone else whispered. Over the next week, she kept pace in every area. Endurance rucks, night navigation, even hand-to-hand drills. Though she wasn't the strongest in combat sparring, she moved with surgical awareness, using her opponent's momentum against them. Every strike was efficient. Every step calculated. But still, respect came slowly. On day 4, while they were running team drills in heavy rain, Hawk confronted her near the armory. "You think we're impressed by headshots?" he asked. "You haven't bled with us. You haven't lost brothers." She met his gaze without flinching. "You think bullets know the difference between your name and mine?" He took a step closer. "You don't belong here." She leaned in. Her voice didn't rise. It lowered, quiet enough that it cut through the rain. "I didn't come here to belong. I came here to make sure you survive." And then she walked away. That night, something shifted. It was subtle. A few of the others began to include her in field briefings. She started getting quiet nods at breakfast. Hawk even handed her an MRE without being asked. But the real turning point came during the blind shooter exercise. Each sniper was given coordinates in a 90-second window to fire at a randomly positioned, moving target without visual recon, without prep, just instinct and map data. One after another, the shooters failed to hit dead center. When Whisper's turn came, she studied the intel for 8 seconds, scanned the horizon through wind-misted optics, then fired. Bullseye. Moving. Target, 950 yards. Through brush, the camp went silent. Even Mason, who had seen decades of excellence, simply wrote on her eval sheet, "Unteachable. Untouchable." Later that night, during a fireside debrief, Hawk sat across from her in the glow of flickering. "Coles, I was wrong," he admitted. "You don't belong here." She raised an eyebrow. "You own this place." Whisper didn't smile, but she gave the slightest nod. "You ever think of enlisting?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't do uniforms." "Why not?" "I'm more useful without one." After a long pause, Hawk extended a hand. "I've bled with a lot of brothers, but if we're lucky. Maybe I'll bleed beside you." She shook his hand. It wasn't friendship. Not yet. But it was the closest thing to it in a place where most people were shadows with scars. By the end of training, her name wasn't whispered in doubt. It was whispered in warning. New arrivals didn't question who the silent woman was. They just watched her shoot. then double-checked their scopes. In a world ruled by ranks and ribbons, Whisper earned respect with only three things: skill, silence, and the unshakable aura of someone who wasn't there to prove anything, only to be ready when the mission mattered most. She didn't break the brotherhood. She bent it just enough to let herself in. They told her she would never see combat. Your role is advisory, the suit had said. Observation, technical consultation. You're not to engage, not to deploy. But in places like Afghanistan, rules evaporate faster than sweat in the eye. The situation had escalated fast. A Navy SEAL reconnaissance unit was inserted into the high ridges of Kunar province. Hostile territory laced with ancient paths, poppy fields, and sniper nests carved into stone. Intel said a high-value Taliban courier would be moving through a remote village, protected by militia fighters and rogue foreign mercenaries. The SEALs would move in, capture the target, and exfil within 72 hours. But the mission went sideways. An unexpected sandstorm delayed drone support. Communications were intermittent. And somewhere in those mountains, a hidden sniper had already taken a shot, one that tore through a SEAL's shoulder, ending the career of their designated marksman. The mission couldn't be scrubbed. The commander needed a replacement. Someone fast, someone surgical, someone who didn't need to be briefed about what was at stake. And someone who didn't officially exist. At midnight, Whisper was woken at Camp Zulu, a black flag forward base near the Pakistan border. A silent operator handed her a folded paper with 5 numbers coordinates. No, please. No explanation. She didn't ask for one. By dawn, she was airborne in a night black helo with no insignia, seated across from a SEAL team that had only heard rumors of her. They glanced at her rifle, custom-built and heavily used, then back to her face. Emotionless, unreadable, focused. No introduction. No call sign. Just a nod from the SEAL commander. We've got Overwatch on a 2-hour window. You're on the North Ridge. ROE is hostile confirmed. No mistakes? Whisper didn't blink. I don't make them. They landed just before sunrise. She moved alone, scaling the jagged ridge like a ghost, finding cover beneath a rocky ledge. Shaped by centuries of wind, her scope swept across the valley. She saw the village, narrow paths, clay walls, and rooftops with young lookouts, barely teenagers, carrying rusted AKs. She saw the path her team would take, weaving in like smoke. Then, she saw movement. 2 insurgents near the well. One adjusted something on a rooftop, a reflective scope. She traced the glint, followed the line, and found him. The enemy sniper, buried in the rocks like her, maybe 800 yards out. Waiting. She adjusted her windage, slowed her breathing. Target looked up. Crack. He never saw her. One shot through the eye. Clean. Quiet. She exhaled and said nothing. The SEALs moved. Smooth, silent. But the village came alive too fast. Screams in Pashto. Men scrambling for weapons. A machine gun burst, ripped through the corner building as civilians ran for cover. The SEALs were pinned down behind a wall. One shouted intercoms, "Overwatch, talk to me." She responded with bullets. 3 shots, 3 kills, a rooftop hostiles. Dropped, and one behind a wall who thought he was hidden. A motorcycle rider with a makeshift RPG fell mid-turn, the weapon skidding out like a kicked can. Inside the command tent, ACIA analyst stared at the incoming video stream and whispered, "Jesus? Who's up on that ridge?" The operator next to him simply said, "The ghost." Whisper wasn't just defending them. She was reading the battlefield like a book she'd memorized, anticipating movements before they happened. Then, a SEAL team member shouted through the comms, "Target secured. Exfil North route." That's when it happened. A flicker in her peripheral vision. barely noticeable. A shimmer of light reflecting off something small and deadly. She swung her scope. Another sniper dot different from the first. Professional. A foreign merc with Western gear. Unknown allegiance, likely Chechen or ex-Spetsnaz. Positioning himself to intercept the exfil route and aiming straight at the teen commander. Her mind calculated distance. 1,517 yards. Uphill angle. Crosswind at 8 knots. No time for a range card. No spotter. No margin for error dot, she inhaled. Time slowed dot crack dot the shot rang out like fate. Through dust and distance, the hostile dropped before his finger touched the trigger. The team escaped seconds later. When they reached the fallback point, the commander radioed base. Courier secured. One friendly wounded. One enemy sniper down. Overwatch unknown, but saved our lives. Whisper packed up without a word. By nightfall, she was back on the bird, flying under darkness again. Silent among warriors who now looked at her differently. At the base, the SEAL commander caught up with her. You disobeyed orders, he said. You are not cleared for combat. Engagement. She nodded. He paused, then added, and you saved my team. She looked him in the eye. I didn't come to follow rules. I came to finish missions. He smiled, just barely. Remind me not to play chess with you. Later, in the commander's report, only one sentence mentioned her. Overwatch support provided by anonymous outside asset. Unmatched precision. Likely turned the tide. No medal. No ribbon. No mention in the Pentagon brief. But among that, SEAL team, hardened men with scars and stories. A silent understanding was formed. A ghost had watched over them, and not one of them would ever forget the woman who never spoke, but made every shot count. They were less than a kilometer from the exfil point when the world slowed. The terrain was brutal, a craggy slope of loose rock and blistering heat. The SEAL team moved in a staggered wedge, scanning the high ridgelines as the captured target. A Taliban courier stumbled between them, blindfolded and coughing blood. Whisper was their ghost in the sky. She had taken an improvised perch on a sheer rock outcropping nearly a mile away, lying prone for the past 11 hours, unmoving, watching. Her camo netting blended into the rocks. Her body was still as bone. She had watched them fight, bleed, and crawl their way through enemy territory. She had already dropped 6 hostiles before noon, without a single call for confirmation. But now something was wrong. She noticed it first. A sudden glint, unnatural, low to the ground, flickering like a mirror, catching sun from a tight angle. Her eyes narrowed behind the scope. There, barely visible, was a shimmer, the unmistakable shine of high-end glass. And then it happened. SEAL team leader, Lieutenant Kyle Braddock, paused to scan a cliffside when a red dot painted his chest. Time froze. No one moved. Then chaos erupted. Sniper. Left ridge. Someone screamed, diving to the ground. Braddock stayed standing, only because he knew if he moved erratically, it might trigger the shot. His face was calm, but his eyes searched the ridge, unable to see the shooter. Whisper saw everything. Shooter was elevated, camouflaged in the rock face. Not Taliban, too disciplined. The weapon was Western, high caliber, with a suppressor. A foreign contractor, perhaps Chechen or South African, hired as Overwatch insurance for the courier's escape. The red dot didn't waver. Whisper had no time. She didn't speak into the combs. No time for that dot. She flicked her safety off, rotated. The elevation dialed precisely 6 clicks, adjusted windage for a left side cross scale, and breathed in once. Then out, and once more. The target shifted slightly. Dot crack dot. The shot echoed off the mountains, like thunder ripping through dry bone. Down. Below, the red dot vanished. The enemy sniper's rifle clattered from the rocks. His body slumped forward, lifeless. A jagged bloom of blood sprayed against the ridge. She had hit him dead through the scope. A shot through glass, across 1,517 yards, against shifting wind, and a moving sun. The SEALs looked up toward her perch. They couldn't see her, but they knew. Braddock, still standing, exhaled as though he had been underwater. "Jesus," he muttered. One of his team members looked at him. "That wasn't luck. That was Whisper." He nodded. "Yeah, and she just saved my damn soul." Minutes later, the team reached the exfil point, a dry riverbed shielded by stone outcroppings. Dust swirled in the air as the evac chopper descended, blades screaming in protest against the mountain wind's dot as the SEALs loaded the detainee and checked wounds. Braddock turned back toward the ridge. Still nothing. Dot no movement. Dot no shimmer. Dot no trace. She had already gone. Back at the forward operating base, Braddock stormed into the command tent, still sweating and dust-covered. Who cleared her to take that shot? The CI advisor barked, holding a satellite image of the incident. She wasn't on the engagement list. Braddock glared at him. If she hadn't taken it, I'd be dead. We all would. The advisor shook his head. She violated 3 protocols. Fired without confirmation. Exposed her position. If her shot had gone wide, she doesn't miss, Braddock said coldly. But it was unauthorized. Braddock leaned in. And so was sending us into an ambush with half the intel missing. Maybe next time, you'll let the shooter do what the shooter does. He left the tent before the argument could escalate. There were still bloodstains on his boots. Whisper sat alone that night on the edge of the camp, legs dangling off a concrete bunker. Her rifle leaned against the wall next to her, barrel darkened with carbon and heat. She had cleaned it twice. Reassembled it blindfolded. It didn't need it. The ritual just calmed her. The scope was cracked now. A hairline fracture from the shot. That bullet had gone through another sniper's optic. A 1 in 1,000 shot. It had taken every shred of her training, every inch of instinct, and not an ounce of hesitation. She hadn't done it to be remembered. She'd done it because Braddock was her responsibility. The entire team was. Whether they wore her patch or not didn't matter. She didn't work for medals. She didn't even work for the flag. She worked for the men who couldn't afford to miss. Because when they did, they died. The chopper pilot approached slowly, like one might approach a sleeping wolf. "They're calling it a record," he said. "Fastest confirmed kill at that distance under live crossfire." Whisper didn't look at him. "They said you broke protocol," he added. She nodded slightly, her gaze still on the horizon. He paused, then smiled. "Guess you broke the rules and saved their asses." Whisper turned her head slightly. Her voice was soft. "I didn't break the rules. I just ignored the ones that got in the way." The pilot laughed quietly and walked off. By morning, the story had spread through every covert channel. A mystery sniper had taken an impossible shot, saved a SEAL team, vanished without credit. They didn't write it into the official report, but among the operators, the legend grew. She didn't wear a name. She didn't take orders like the others. But when death came knocking on the commander's chest, it was Whisper who pulled the trigger faster. And when she did, the red dot didn't mean death anymore. It meant she was watching. The base was unusually quiet the morning after the exfil. No celebration. No speeches. Just the hum of rotors, the hiss of steam from the cook tents, and the low murmur of special operations teams debriefing behind closed doors. Lieutenant Commander Kyle Braddock sat alone in the debrief tent, elbows on the folding table, blood still caked into the seams of his gloves. Across from him, 2 intelligence officers scrolled silently through satellite footage, zooming in on the red dot incident, frame by frame. "You're lucky she fired," One of them muttered. Braddock didn't respond. He was thinking about that moment. Standing exposed, helpless, knowing the trigger pull wouldn't come from him. He remembered how still the world felt, like he could hear his heartbeat echo off the rocks. And then, the dot vanished. The wind shifted. The weight lifted dot she had been watching. He stood up abruptly. "Where is she?" he asked one of the officers. Shrugged. "Gone. Packed up right after the shot. She was never here officially. We can't detain or debrief someone who doesn't exist on paper." Braddock walked out without another word. He found her on the far edge of the airstrip, kneeling beside her rifle case, wiping the desert grit from the barrel with a piece of cloth. She wore the same sun-faded jacket, the sleeves pushed up, her face half hidden beneath the brim of that worn-out cap. No medals on her chest. No nameplate, just the same presence, silent and certain. He approached quietly. She didn't look up. "You broke a direct order," he said finally, stopping just short of her shadow. "I followed a higher one," she replied. He paused, taking in the way she handled the weapon, not just as a tool, but as something alive. Something she trusted. "You saved my team. You saved me." Whisper stood and locked the case. The metal snapped shut with finality. "No thanks necessary," she said. "That's not why I was there." He studied her for a moment. "You've never worn a uniform?" She shook her head. "Never sworn an oath?" "I swore to the mission," she said. "That's enough." Braddock considered that. There was a time when he'd have dismissed a statement like that. Too soft, too vague, too unmilitary. But he couldn't anymore. Not after seeing what she could do. He reached up, removed his cap, and stood at attention. Then, slowly, deliberately, he saluted her. It wasn't a casual gesture. It wasn't performative. It was a salute earned. Not by rank or title, but by action. By steel nerves, precise instincts, and the kind of loyalty you couldn't issue or teach. Whisper didn't return it. She just nodded once, sharp, subtle, final. "Why didn't you salute back?" he asked quietly. "I'm not in your chain of command," she said. "And I don't take honors I didn't ask for." He lowered his hand. "Then take this. Every man on that team owes you his life. Whether you want the credit or not." She gave him a look, not defiant, not cold, just real. "I don't do it for credit," she said. "I do it so the good ones come home." Hours later, she was gone. No one saw her board. The aircraft. No one signed her out. Her bunk was stripped bare, only dust where her boots had stood, only a folded slip of paper left behind. Protect the mission. Not the myth. The base returned to its rhythm. New missions. New briefings. But the whisper of her name remained, like an echo behind every door. Some said she'd been reassigned. Others claimed she disappeared for good, off the grid, back to the shadows. The CIA advisor pushed for a reprimand. She violated field protocol. He insisted. Braddock overruled it. He filed his own report instead. Operation. Red mark successful overwatch. Unidentified civilian asset 1 confirmed HVT neutralized remarks. Subject displayed unmatched proficiency, situational awareness, and mission-first decision-making. Recommendation. Permanent field clearance under direct combat operations. The brass tried to redact her entirely. Her name was never mentioned, but her mark remained. A week later, at the Naval Special Warfare Sniper School in Coronado, a new instructor walked the line of trainees. "Let me tell you a story," he said. Last month, SEAL commander had a red dot on his chest, about a breath away from death. He didn't duck. He didn't shoot. He just trusted someone he never met. One of the trainees asked, "Was it another SEAL?" The instructor smiled. "Nope. She wasn't even in uniform." "What was her rank?" "No rank. No name, just a call sign. The class leaned in. He let the silence linger. They call her. Whisper. And every head on the range turned toward the targets just a little more carefully, because somewhere out there was a shooter so precise, so calm under pressure, that even the Navy's best saluted her without knowing who she was. When the sun rose over the Kandahar horizon 3 days later, she was already gone. Not AWOL, not discharged. Just gone. No one knew how. No one saw her leave. Her gear vanished from the weapons cache without tripping a single sensor. Her name, not that it had ever been official, was deleted from every temporary access list. All that remained was a single black hard case, left quietly on a cot at the edge of the barracks. Inside, her rifle. Custom modified, carbon scored. From hundreds of confirmed shots, its serial number scratched away by hand. Next to it, a folded note written in block print on torn canvas. Mission complete. No longer required. No longer needed. Under that, a laminated photo, a grainy still frame from the Red Dot incident. A SEAL team mid-exfil, Braddock in the center. A tiny red glint on his chest. And beneath it, a second, more chilling photo. The enemy sniper. Bullet still lodged in his cracked optic lens, blood frozen in motion. Dead before he ever had the chance to squeeze the trigger. At the bottom, one final line scrawled in black marker. One shot, not for glory, for gravity. When the commander saw the note, he didn't speak. He simply closed the case, stood at attention, and nodded, as if Whisper had been standing there to see it. But she wasn't, and no one knew where she went. Theories spread fast, faster than command could shut them down. Some said she was extracted by the same gray-suited handlers who first brought her into the fold. Others claimed she was killed during a secret operation gone sideways, buried in a mountain no one would ever visit again. But the most persistent theory, whispered by SEALs, Rangers, and Delta shooters alike, was that she walked away on her own terms, that the mission had changed her, or maybe completed her, that she'd done what no one else could do, and now wanted no part of what came next. I heard she went off-grid, one sniper said over beers at a safe house in Jordan. Like real off-grid. Montana, maybe. Living with wolves or something. Another operator shrugged. Wouldn't be surprised. Some people are meant to be shadows. There were even rumors of sightings. A woman in Colorado buying ammo with no ID. A shooter in Arizona winning a cash-only range challenge, then disappearing before awards were handed out. A trail cam in Wyoming that caught the blurry image of a lone figure carrying a long rifle and vanishing into the tree line just before snow season. But no one ever confirmed anything, because no one really wanted to dot in a classified email thread. Between SOCOM liaisons, one analyst wrote, "This operative doesn't behave like any known asset. No desire for recognition. No need for approval. Psychological profile suggests an unprecedented fusion of lethal instinct and moral independence." His superior replied bluntly, "Dangerous, but useful. Let her vanish until we need her again." 6 months later, a box arrived at a small naval intelligence hub in San Diego. No return address. Just a secure pouch with a data drive and a note. "For your records. Delete after viewing." The drive contained encrypted footage, helmet cam audio from a failed NATO mission in Syria. 4 soldiers trapped in a collapsed building. Enemy gunmen approaching fast. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the shadows. Every hostile dropped in clean, single shots. The last thing the camera caught was the silhouette of a woman walking away. Through a breach in the wall, her rifle slung over her shoulder. The timestamp proved one thing. Whisper wasn't gone. She was just somewhere the system couldn't reach. Back in camp. Sentinel, the same Virginia sniper facility where she first earned her unofficial title, a new batch of recruits stood on the firing line. One instructor, a former teammate from the Kunar Op, walked behind them silently. He stopped at a new shooter struggling with wind calculations. "You know how far the best shot ever taken from this line was?" The instructor asked Dot. The recruit shook his head. 1,517 yards, he said. One shot, crosswind, uphill, saved a SEAL commander's life, never missed a target, never asked for a medal. She packed her rifle and left before anyone even got her real name. The trainee looked skeptical. "You serious?" "She was a ghost," the instructor replied. "Still is." Then he smiled. "And if you ever see a woman in civilian gear, hands in her pockets, standing still at the end of your range, you'd better shoot straight, because she be watching." In the forests of northern Montana, a child followed deer tracks through the frost. His father, a former Marine, watched from a distance, letting the boy learn, fail, and find his own instincts. The child raised his .22, aimed carefully. Then, a faint sound, a shot from somewhere so distant it felt like a whisper. The buck dropped instantly. The child turned, confused, but there was no one there. Only a glimmer of sun on metal in the far ridge. The father narrowed his eyes and grinned. Somewhere, she was still watching. Legends usually start with medals, declarations, salutes in front of flags. Whispers started with silence, no fanfare. No citations. No retirement party or folded flag. Just stories passed between warriors like sacred relics, always spoken softly, as if too much volume might scare the truth away. In a way, that was exactly how she would have wanted it, because Whisper never wanted to be remembered. She wanted to be useful, and she was. Over and over again, not just in the Red Dot incident, though that was the one the SEALs would always remember. Not just in the Syrian rescue, caught on that nameless hard drive. She'd operated in half a dozen other theaters, under at least 3 different coding names, always in shadows. Always watching. Never once for the glory. A year later, Lieutenant Commander Kyle Braddock stood at the podium of a classified sniper symposium in Norfolk, addressing a room full of special operations sharpshooters, some just back from the Horn of Africa, others prepping for rotation in South America. He cleared his throat, looking down at the sheet in front of him, but he never read from it. Instead, he looked up. "You ever hear a story," he began, "that sticks with you so hard, it changes how you pull a trigger?" A few in the room nodded slowly. He continued. "She didn't wear a name, didn't take orders the way most do, never joined the system, but operated with more precision and ethics than half the roster combined. Whisper wasn't her real name. We never knew that. But that's what we called her, because when she was around, Beth didn't shout. It whispered." A murmur ran through the crowd. Braddock stepped back from the mic, let the silence settle, then added, "She took the shot that saved my life. And she didn't stick around for thanks. Just packed her rifle and disappeared. You don't forget someone like that. You measure yourself against them." He tapped the podium once with his knuckle. "And every time I step into a new AO, I ask myself, am I pulling this trigger like she would? With certainty? With conscience? Without ego?" Then, after a beat, if you can answer yes, then you're not just a sniper. You're a guardian. He walked off stage without waiting for applause. There was none. But every shooter in that room recalibrated their sights that afternoon with a little more care. She'd never admit it, but Whisper had started to feel the weight of ghosts. The ones she saved, the ones she didn't, the ones she could have. That's why she disappeared. Not to run from the mission, but to protect it. Because sometimes the mission becomes you. And if you're not careful, You start believing you are the only one who can finish it. So she vanished. But not completely. In a dusty bookstore in Helena, Montana, a veteran-run nonprofit received a package with no return address. Inside was a manuscript, typed, bound with string, no cover page. The title on the first page, Through the Scope, Ethics, Distance, and the Quiet Mind. There was no author listed, but any sniper who read it knew. The pages were filled with thoughts too sharp to be academic, too real to be fiction. Details about breath control under panic fire, wind dialing during microbursts in mountain valleys, and the emotional cost of watching someone through a scope for 12 hours before being forced to end them. Each chapter ended with a quote, the last quote in the final chapter read, "There is no glory in being the last line, only responsibility." The nonprofit printed it, quietly, circulated it among special ops communities. No commercial sale, no press, just passed hand to hand like a sacred text. And it changed people. More shooters started refusing ego kills. More teens reviewed civilian exposure drills. More instructors began talking about the whisper zone, a term to describe the mental state just before a life-altering shot. Her legacy wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. And still, no one could find her. One former ranger claimed to have seen her in Alaska, standing at the edge of a frozen lake, eyes closed, listening to the wind. Another swore she taught a wilderness survival course under a fake name in Idaho, never once mentioning weapons, though her eyes scanned every tree line. All hearsay. All part of the myth. But every operator knew myths don't come from nowhere. One foggy morning on a private range deep in Washington state, a visiting Marine Corps sniper instructor found something pinned to his paper target. A single cartridge, polished, fired, and a handwritten note beneath it. Still watching. Still listening. Don't miss. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. Years passed. Wars changed. Old enemies faded. New ones emerged. But among the elite, the ones who operated without names, ranks, or rest, there was always one story that came back again and again, about a woman who never wanted fame, never demanded recognition, never saluted first, but who once took a shot so impossible it rewrote the definition of a sniper, a woman who wasn't even in the system, but who stood above it. Anyway, they called her Whisper. And every time a red dot appeared where it shouldn't, someone silently hoped she was still out there. Somewhere. Watching. The end.